Today we mark in stark contrast the viewpoints of these two seemingly normal individuals.
On the floor today, we have Tyler and Sheldon, two members of the Lavender Lingo party. They'll be debating some of the most important and debated questions of all time, varying from the political to existential to the downright silly. Gentle people of the world, let's begin the debate of the most debated questions of all time.
No dogs or cats were eaten or harmed in the making of this video. We're Lavender Lingo and we approve this message.
People of the YouTube, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Sheldon. Welcome to Lavender Lingo. First question, should parents be allowed to genetically modify their children? Sheldon, why don't you think that people should be able to genetically modify their children? I prefer to be called Candidate Sheldon, actually. Okay, Candidate Sheldon. Why don't you think that people should be able to genetically modify their children? While genetic modification in a utopian society would do great things for humanity, I don't believe that genetic modification would be applied equally across all populations. Rich people would have greater access to genetic modification, and thus the gap between the disenfranchised and the wealthy would grow greater. And for those reasons, I would have to say that no, we should not allow genetic modification. Now over to Candidate Tyler for their response.
While I agree with many of the points that Candidate Sheldon brought up, I do think that people should be allowed to genetically modify their children, with socioeconomic and diversity at the forefront of government regulations. In those government regulations, I do believe that any body modifications... That's crazy. Any body modifications, whether it be to mental ability, physical abilities, or appearance, should be strictly prohibited as to create a wider gene pool and maintain that wide gene pool. While looking for the betterment of society and the people, I also believe that we need to make sure that we are eradicating things from our society that do not serve a purpose, like cancer or STDs. And we can't do that through genetic modification. Don't mock me right now.
While my opponent does make several decent points, I would have to argue that this type of regulation would be quite difficult to do across the board. As it stands, rich people don't really listen to regulation as it is. Donald Trump never paid any taxes, so...
True.
Elon Musk launched a rocket without government approval and nothing happened, so what's to stop them?
Okay, you're right, but that isn't our problem, that's government protections, although I see your point. I see your point, however, I would like to raise your point, stating that we...
This is my rebuttal. You don't get an additional time to rebuttal to me.
Okay, fine.
Those are my closing statements, thank you. Viewers all across the globe are curious. Are hotdog sandwiches?
Tyler, we'll start with you. Yes, because by definition, a hot dog and a sandwich are both a piece of meat slipped between sliced bread. And just because the bread isn't cut all the way through doesn't make it not a sandwich.
A sandwich.
Think about this, if you took a loaf of bread and did not slice it all the way through, but then still inserted the same BLT contents, does that not make it a sandwich? That was an incredible answer. Now we'll move over to Sheldon.
No, hot dogs are not sandwiches. Sandwiches, by definition, are contents placed between two slices of bread. Hot dogs are technically one piece of bread that is split open. And thus, I would argue that hot dogs are technically tacos and not sandwiches.
Okay, they're definitely not tacos.
Your BLT thing would have been a taco.
No, it would have been closer to a gyro, but a gyro is a sandwich.
It's a taco. We're not in Europe, we're in America, where we call things like that tacos.
Pause. I would like to pose to you, the viewer, how often does that little tiny thin piece of bread stay together at the bottom of your hot dog? How often does it rip? When it rips, is it now all of a sudden a sandwich?
Get a quality bun.
That's the quality of the buns.
Yeah, your dollar store buns.
Honey, we have the same dollar store buns. You do the grocery shopping.
Comment below if you think that I'm right and that hot dogs are tacos and not sandwiches.
They're not tacos for sure.
Justice for hot dogs.
No, they're not tacos.
They are tacos.
You're speaking to a Mexican, they're not tacos. Next question. Should trans athletes be allowed to compete in gender-specific sports?
Wow, 2 yeses. Tyler, you go first.
Yes, but before I get into my answer as to why, I would like to point out that this, in general, affects trans women more than it affects most others. That's most likely because men are better than women at sports. And that's just completely false. And let me also say real quick that there are no athletes out there pretending to be trans so that they can beat their opponents in sports. That's just not happening. I would like to argue where gender is a concern, like wrestling or like boxing, that instead of dividing the sport by gender, maybe we could divide it by weight class, which some admittedly are. And then other popular sports where, for example, like cycling or like swimming or track and field, where there is no need to divide by gender or by weight class, they should be played as normal. When trans people, often people who are going through hormone replacement, not that they have to, but when trans people go through hormone replacement, their bone density is affected, their muscle building is affected, their mental well-being is affected, all things that go into how well you compete in a specific sport. So yes, all of them are facing their own strengths and weaknesses within their sport, just like their cis counterparts.
Yes, I also think that transgender people should be allowed to participate in gender-specific sports. The whole idea that trans women have an unfair advantage stems from the idea that they have higher testosterone. We know that gender-affirming care, such as hormone replacement therapy or puberty blockers, means that testosterone levels, and therefore the advantages that they would supposedly give you, are the same in trans athletes as they are in cisgendered athletes. Transgender women also aren't the only women that have higher levels of testosterone. Women with polycystic ovarian syndrome often have elevated levels of testosterone, but they're still allowed to participate in sports. It is also important to note that there is no clear correlation between testosterone and athletic performance. It's purely speculation, and scientific evidence does not support it.
Great answer.
That's a good guy over here.
Wow, those were two well thought out answers. And I'm sure I speak for my colleague when I say that we also agree trans athletes should be allowed to compete in gender-specific sports.
That was me sipping my tea.
You have no tea. Okay. Pineapple shouldn't be on pizza. No, that wasn't a question. That was a statement. The question is, do you agree or disagree with abortion? Tyler, you first. I absolutely agree with a woman's right to choose and allowing abortions. I do believe that a woman should be allowed to get an abortion when she needs one. That is between her and her doctor. That being said, I don't necessarily agree with late-term abortions. I do believe that late-term abortions may sometimes be necessary based on medical necessity, but that is again between a woman and her doctor. That is quite literally all I have to say about this argument, because women just should have the right to choose what happens to their own body.
Sheldon, why do you agree with abortion? I personally believe that every single person has bodily autonomy.
I have something else to add. Religion should be taken out of this question. Absolutely. And I'm sick of religion being in this debate ever. And let me just say this real fast. I'm sorry, I had more to say. It's so tired and old to have religion as a part of what happens to a woman. Your religion shouldn't decide what happens to my body or anybody else's. That also being said, we should remove the three biggest reasons as to why abortion might be okay. Because beyond those three reasons, there are so many other reasons why an abortion may be medically necessary. And again, like I said before, that is between a woman and her doctor, and not for you to decide. I'm done. Thank you so much.
I personally believe that every single person should have bodily autonomy, which means that it is nobody's business but a woman's what she does with her body or her uterus. And therefore, I believe that neither government nor man should have any right to tell a woman that she has to have a child. A woman can have subjective experiences. A fetus cannot. A fetus also cannot sustain life without its mother's body, and thus is not technically a person yet. So, I feel like when it comes to giving bodily autonomy or personal rights to one of the two parties involved in that situation, they belong to the woman and not the zygote.
So I guess I have a question for you then. So you obviously believe that abortion can happen. Do you agree on any regulations on when abortion should happen?
I don't personally believe in late-term abortions, but I also don't think that late-term abortions are ever just... Nobody is deciding to have a late-term abortion just because they decided they didn't want to have a baby. It's always medically necessary. And again, none of anybody else's business.
I don't know, that may not be true, but we need to put more work into after-birth care. And that's a government on the government and the people fighting for these children's rights. That they're not going to put money into making sure these children have care after birth, then don't fight for them to be born in the first place.
Who should be the next president of the United States of America?
We're looking for a president who will fight for us.
A president who puts the wants, needs, and priorities of the middle class at the forefront. A president who cares about human rights.
And even though none of our rights as LGBT people are on the ballot this year, you'd be kidding yourself to believe that it won't come back up eventually. Not that it matters though, because we are always fighting for those people whose rights have been stripped away from them. And women all across the United States are facing having their rights stripped away from them depending on which state they come from.
We won't stand for this. It's time to turn the page on these outdated laws and opinions that have hurt so many. And so make sure you go out and vote.
If you haven't registered, or if you're unsure if you are registered, please use the website in the description below to go and see, and make sure that you are registered, ready to vote on November 5th.
Next time on Lavender Lingo, we're going upstate for a Halloween day trip, so we'd love it if you join us for a spooky little vlog.
What do you think we should dress up as? Let us know down in the comments below.
We'll see you next week. Until then, hit subscribe and make ghoul choices.
Did you just say ghoul choices? You're dumb.